They said it was an accident, until he found the wrong man. Hiding. 12 years ago, the Dempsey siblings vanished into the Louisiana bayou, swallowed by fog, silence, and shallow lies. The sheriff said their airboat must have flipped in a sudden storm. The town called it tragic. Their father never believed a damn word. Now, Walter Dempsey stands outside a rotting bait shack, staring into the sunken eyes of a man he hasn't seen since the night his children disappeared. Brady Locke. He's thinner, jumpier, and afraid. But it's not the swamp he's afraid of. There's something Brady knows, and it's written all over his trembling hands and the photo on the cabin wall, the one that shouldn't exist. Walter came here chasing ghosts. He's about to unearth something worse. The town of Rosedale Bend never changed. Cypress trees still loomed like forgotten sentinels, their roots coiled tight around the banks of the Atchafalaya Basin, as if holding secrets beneath the surface. The humidity wrapped around you like guilt, thick, invisible, inescapable. Walter Dempsey had stopped trying to escape anything a long time ago. At 61, he looked older. His beard was patchy and gray, his frame hollowed out like the shotgun shack he lived in, and his eyes, a dull, restless blue, rarely settled on anything for long. But today was different. Today, those eyes were fixed on a boat launch at the edge of town where laughter used to echo. He stood at the end of the broken dock, peering out into the slow churning water. This was the last place his kids had been seen, Caleb, Elsie, and little Talia, 12 years ago, on what was supposed to be a celebratory ride through the bayou. Caleb had just landed a scholarship in Baton Rouge. Walter had grilled steaks that night. They never came back. He touched the wood beneath his boots, half expecting to feel their voices rising up through the planks. Instead, all he felt was damp rot. Behind him, the sound of tires on gravel snapped the moment. He turned slowly. June. She was still beautiful in that southern steel kind of way, thin, upright, the lines on her face more from resolve than age. She stepped out of her rusted sedan with the precision of someone used to carrying burdens without spilling. "You forget what day it is again?" she asked, not harshly, but not softly either. Walter didn't answer. She approached, holding out a folded piece of paper. "It came in the mail, addressed to you." He took it, unfolded it. One photograph, old, grainy, faded, but unmistakable. Caleb, Elsie, and Talia on the boat. Not just any boat, the one they vanished on. And it was stamped with a date, one day before they disappeared. Walter's heart slammed in his chest. Where'd this come from? No return address, postmark from St. Martinville. That was 40 miles east. He looked up. Someone's playing a cruel game. June crossed her arms. Or someone's scared you're about to find out the truth. They stood in silence, the buzzing of dragonflies the only sound. "You still think they drowned?" Walter said. June didn't flinch. "No. I think someone let the town believe they drowned." Walter watched her walk back to the car. He remembered how she used to stand at this very spot for hours after the kids disappeared, staring into the trees. For a year, she hoped. Then she worked, and Walter drank. He glanced back at the photo. It wasn't just the kids in the picture. There was another figure, half-cropped on the edge of the frame. Male. Young. Familiar. Brady Locke, Caleb's old friend, greasy-haired, boat-smart, always lurking around the docks. He'd vanished around the same time. But nobody asked questions back then. The town didn't want a scandal, just an answer. Any answer. Walter folded the photo, slipped it into his shirt pocket, and turned away from the water. He had a name now. And a direction. Rosedale Bend had buried its secrets beneath mud, moss, and silence. But Walter was done burying. He was going to dig, even if it meant the swamp tried to swallow him too. Brady Locke lived on the edge of nowhere, where the swamp grew thick and the roads turned to mud and memory. Walter hadn't seen him in over a decade, but rumor had it he worked out of a ramshackle repair shop upriver, fixing boat engines for cash and solitude. Walter took the back roads, steering his aging truck down winding gravel paths, cypress limbs scraping the windshield like fingers brushing secrets. As he drove deeper into the basin, cell service vanished, and the world narrowed to frog calls, buzzing mosquitoes, and the occasional splash of something unseen. He found the place just after noon, a slouching cabin hidden behind a veil of moss and overgrowth, half swallowed by the swamp. A few rusted hulls sat out front like peeled carcasses. The workshop door was propped open, and someone moved inside, shadowy, precise. Walter stepped out of the truck. The air grew heavier. "Brady Locke," he called. A pause. Then a man stepped into the doorway, rag in hand. He was thinner than Walter remembered, but not frail. His dark eyes flicked over Walter with sharp calculation, his jaw tight. "Didn't expect to see you, Mr. Dempsey." Walter held up the photograph. "Then, I guess you didn't expect this either." Brady froze. The color drained from his face. Walter took a step forward. "You were there." Brady shook his head, but it was too slow, too unsure. "I wasn't. Don't lie. You're in the damn picture. One day before they disappeared. Why didn't you ever come forward?" Brady wiped his hands on the rag, eyes darting to the tree line. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." "Like what?" "They weren't supposed to get hurt." Walter's stomach turned. So they did get hurt. Brady swore under his breath, stepped inside the cabin, and Walter followed without waiting for an invitation. The inside smelled of oil and mildew. Tools hung on the walls, but everything was too clean, like a stage. Brady turned, his voice hoarse. "Look, I didn't know who else was involved. I thought if I stayed out here, stayed quiet, they'd leave me alone." "Who?" Brady's mouth opened, then closed again. Then he whispered, "The ones who run things out past Little Canaan. The ones who use the swamp like a goddamn highway." Walter's fists clenched. "You let my kids vanish, and you said nothing. I was 19. I was scared. And now?" Brady glanced at the photo again. His shoulders sagged. "Now. I think someone wants this buried again, and they know you're digging." Walter took a slow breath. "You're going to tell me everything. Today. Right now." Brady hesitated. "If I talk, they'll come after me." Walter leaned in. "Then let them. But you better start talking before I decide to drag your ass to the sheriff's office myself." Brady swallowed hard. Outside, a boat engine growled faintly in the distance. Something in his face changed. Fear, maybe, or resolve. "They didn't drown," he said quietly. "They were taken, and not by strangers." Walter felt his world tilt sideways. "Taken by who?" Brady met his eyes. "Start with Axel Stroud. You'll find your answers, but they won't let you leave with them." Walter looked to the door. The water wasn't the only thing that could kill you in the bayou. Sometimes the people were worse. Walter didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table with the photograph laid out in front of him, a chipped mug of black coffee untouched beside it. Outside, the wind stirred the swamp grasses. The cicadas had gone quiet. Even the frogs, normally a drunken chorus of croaks and chatter, seemed subdued, like the land itself was holding its breath. Axel Stroud. The name crawled like a splinter beneath his skin. Walter remembered Axel only vaguely, older than Caleb by at least 10 years, but always around the boat launch. Grew up rough, drove a fan boat like it was part of his body, and had that slick, quiet confidence of someone who knew where the law couldn't reach. Rumor was He ran deliveries out to the oil rigs and duck camps that dotted the outer marsh. Nobody asked what was in the crates. Now Brady had dropped his name like a lit match, and Walter couldn't stop staring at it. By morning, the sky over Rosedale Bend was thick with gray, not stormy, just low, oppressive. Walter left before sunrise, shotgun wrapped in canvas in the back of his truck, just in case. He wasn't looking for violence. He was looking for answers. But in the bayou, those two things had a way of becoming the same. He headed east, past Little Canaan, an unincorporated strip of trailer homes, closed bait shops, and one church with a permanently broken steeple. Axel had been seen out here, according to Brady. "Runs fuel out to the trawlers from the spillway dock," he'd said. "Sometimes more than fuel." Walter pulled over just past mile marker 21. There was a small access road, mostly grown over, leading down toward the levee. He got out, locked the truck, and started on foot. The deeper he went, the quieter it got, until he heard it. A motor, not a big one, nothing commercial, just a quiet hum of an outboard engine somewhere close. Then came the voices. Two men, arguing softly. Walter crouched behind a cypress trunk, easing forward until he could see the dock through the branches. A flat-bottomed skiff bobbed against the wood. Two men were loading something from a beat-up pickup into the boat, sealed coolers and a duffel bag. One of them was Axel Stroud. Walter would never forget that jawline, the chain around his neck, or the cobra tattoo that curled up from his collarbone like it was watching for weakness. The other man was shorter, lean, armed. Neither looked like they were planning a fishing trip. Then Axel stopped, his head tilted. He sniffed the air like a hound. Walter froze. "I told you this place ain't clean," Axel muttered. "I feel something wrong." "You're paranoid." Axel's hand dropped to his belt, where a pistol sat waiting. Walter slowly backed away, careful not to snap a twig. But the moss shifted behind him. A branch crunched underfoot. Both men turned. "Who's out there?" Walter didn't wait. He bolted up the trail, lungs burning, heart thundering against his ribs. Behind him, someone shouted. A gun fired. Once, then twice. Bullets tore past, splintering bark. He made it back to the road, threw himself behind his truck, and waited. Nothing. Just silence. Then a soft whir. The motor starting again, fading back downriver. They didn't follow. But now they knew someone had been watching. Walter leaned against the side of the truck, sweat and adrenaline leaking from his skin. He took the photo back out of his pocket and looked again at Caleb's face. He was close now, closer than he'd ever been. But he wasn't the only one hunting. Something in the water had started to stir, and it had his scent. By the time Walter returned home, the sun was high, but the light felt brittle, too clean, like something trying too hard to feel normal. He kept checking the rearview mirror. Nothing followed him. Still, he drove the long way around town, twice, before finally pulling into his gravel driveway. His shotgun shack stood as crooked as ever, the porch sagging beneath the weight of years. He noticed it immediately. The screen door was half open. He never left it that way. Walter stopped the engine, let the silence sit, then opened the driver's side slowly. A crow called from somewhere up in the pines. Nothing else. He moved toward the porch, shotgun in hand. The front door was locked. That was worse somehow. He circled the side, checked the windows. Nothing broken. No signs of forced entry. Just that screen door, open like a mouth waiting for him. Inside, the house looked untouched. Too untouched. Like someone had stepped in and stepped out just as quickly. It took him nearly 10 minutes to find it. A piece of paper, folded once, tucked under the fridge magnet shaped like a gator with missing teeth. It hadn't been there that morning. Walter unfolded it. 5 words, printed in blocky, typed letters. Stop looking, or you're next. There was no signature, no smudges, no smell. But there was something else. A small plastic baggie taped to the corner. Inside it, a single braid of dark brown hair tied with a faded blue ribbon. Talia's favorite color. Walter dropped into the chair, the air gone from the room. His hands shook. He hadn't seen that ribbon since Talia was 8, when she used to sit on the back steps and sing to the turtles in the pond. Whoever left this note had been inside his house. Whoever left it knew everything. He stood up slowly and looked around the room. Every shadow now felt like a threat. Every squeak of the floorboards, a whisper. For 12 years, he'd lived in grief. Now he was living in danger. Walter sat down again, picked up the phone, and dialed a number he never thought he'd use again.
"June?" he said when she answered. "We need to talk." Her silence on the other end was thick. "I'm listening," she finally said. He took a breath, then told her everything. Brady, Axel, the gunshots, the note, the braid. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, she said, "You need to come over, and bring that letter. I've got something you haven't seen." "What?" But she'd already hung up. Walter stared at the receiver, his pulse still loud in his ears. The swamp had taken his children. The town had taken his peace. But now someone had come into his home, crossed a line. Whoever they were, they didn't understand something. Walter Dempsey had nothing left to lose. And that made him very, very dangerous. June lived on the other side of town, in a weather-beaten duplex next to an old sugarcane field that hadn't been harvested in a decade. She kept to herself, taught Sunday school, took in mending work. People respected her silence, mistook it for healing. But Walter knew better. He parked in the dirt patch beside her place and knocked once. No answer. He knocked again. The door opened a crack. June peered through, her eyes tired but sharp. Then she unlatched the chain. "Come in." He stepped into the small, tidy home. It smelled of lavender and starch, just like it always had. The table was set with 2 mugs of chicory coffee. She must have known he'd come. June gestured to the chair. "Sit." He handed her the letter. She read it once, eyes narrowing. Then she set it down gently and slid something across the table. It was a box. Old cedar wood, with a rusted clasp. Walter stared at it. "What is this?" She didn't answer, just nodded for him to open it. He did. Inside were photographs, documents, newspaper clippings, all meticulously organized. Some yellowed with age, others freshly printed. But they had one thing in common: Axel Stroud. There he was, grinning beside a sheriff's deputy in a campaign photo from 2009. In another, leaning against a flatbed truck loaded with crates, stamped with a fake seafood distributor's logo. One photo showed him shaking hands with a state senator during a fundraiser in Lafayette. Walter blinked. "How long have you—" "Since year 2, June said quietly. "After the official investigation closed. I couldn't let it go. So I started digging." Walter flipped through the papers. Bank accounts, shell companies, property transfers. A small envelope sat beneath it all, worn and sealed. He picked it up. "What's this?" June hesitated. "A letter. From Elsie. I found it taped under her nightstand drawer 3 years ago when I finally boxed up their things." Walter stared at her, stunned. "You never told me." "You weren't in any place to hear it, Walter. You were drunk by noon most days. You would have gone off and gotten yourself killed." She stood up and crossed to the window, her arms folded. "I was waiting for something, a sign that you still had a fight left in you." Walter opened the envelope with trembling hands. It was handwritten in loopy teenage cursive, ink faded but legible. "Daddy,
If something happens to us, it's not an accident. Caleb's been acting weird. He won't tell me what he's doing on those trips, but I know it's something dangerous. There's a man. He has tattoos and a gold chain with a compass on it. I think he's threatening Caleb. I heard them arguing behind the dock. Please, if we're not back, find him. His name is Axel. Love, Elsie. Walter's breath caught. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It was truth. Recorded. Warned. He looked up. I need to find him. I need to know what happened. June nodded. You will, but not alone. Walter blinked. What? She walked to the coat closet and pulled out a leather satchel. From it, she took a battered Smith & Wesson revolver. I kept this for a reason, she said. You think you're the only one who's been haunted? Walter couldn't help but stare at her. June, the school teacher, the church volunteer, had fire under that quiet skin. You don't have to. I do, she said. They were my babies too, and you're not the only one who wants answers. For a moment they just looked at each other. No pain, no anger, just two broken people rediscovering the same war. Then June reached for her coat. Let's go see Brady again. I think it's time he tells us everything he left out. Walter nodded. This time, he wasn't walking into the swamp alone. This time, the ghosts were walking with him, and they were armed. Brady Locke didn't answer the door when they knocked. Walter pounded harder. Still nothing. His truck's still here, June said, nodding toward the beat-up Ford half sunk in the grass. You think he ran? No, Walter muttered. Brady doesn't run. He hides. There's a difference. He reached under the eaves, felt around until his fingers brushed a metal key taped behind the siding. Some habits don't die. They stepped inside. The shack was dark and too quiet. The oil lamp on the workbench was still burning low, untouched since their last visit. A mug of coffee sat half-drunk beside a pile of tools. Dust hadn't had time to settle. Walter moved slowly, scanning the corners. June stayed behind him, her hand resting on the grip of her revolver. Then they saw it. Blood. A thin trail leading from the back door out into the marsh behind the shop. Walter's stomach clenched. He followed the trail, through the tall grass, past the rusted anchor chain and sunken crab pots. The further they walked, the fresher the blood. And then they found him. Brady. Lying face down near the base of a twisted cypress. One hand clutched his side, shirt soaked through. He was still breathing, but barely. Walter dropped beside him. Brady! Hey! Stay with me! Brady's eyes fluttered open, then rolled toward Walter. They knew. You came back, he rasped. They followed me home. Who? Walter asked. Axel? Brady shook his head weakly. Not him. The other one, Jace, the one with the scar down his neck. He said it was your warning. June knelt, unzipping her satchel. Hold still, she ordered. We're going to stop the bleeding. But Brady grabbed Walter's arm with surprising strength. They've got a place, storage facility, old sugar mill off Bayou LaGrue. That's where they keep the ones who don't cooperate. Walter froze. The ones like my kids? Brady nodded. I think they moved them there after. I think they kept some alive. For trade or leverage. He coughed, blood foaming at the corner of his mouth. You gotta go, he choked. Now. They're cleaning up, burning everything. You wait too long, and there won't be anything left. June finished packing the wound with gauze and tied it off with a strip from her scarf. He's going to need help. We can't just leave him. Walter stood, staring at the trees. He could feel it now, the clock ticking louder. No, he said. But we can't wait for an ambulance either. If Axel's burning the past, we've got one shot. June looked at him. Then we split. He turned. You take Brady into town. I'll go to the sugar mill.
You'll be walking into a trap. I'll be walking into their memory, Walter said. And I need to know what they buried with it. June hesitated, then reached into her satchel and pulled out the revolver. Take it, she said. You're not dying out there alone. Walter took the weapon, nodded once, and started back toward the truck.
The blood trail might have started with Brady, but Walter was going to make sure it ended with the truth, even if it meant wading through hell to get there.
The sugar mill at Bayou LeGroux had been abandoned for 20 years, ever since the floods and mold lawsuits bankrupted the co-op that owned it. Most folks in Rosedale Bend avoided the place, not out of fear, but because the swamp had started to reclaim it. Roofs caved in, machines rusted to skeletons. It was a ghost factory now, swallowed by vines and silence. But not tonight. Walter parked his truck half a mile out, near a stand of willow trees. The revolver June gave him rested heavy in his coat pocket. He'd made sure it was loaded. He followed the road on foot, boots squelching through mud and crushed cane. The air grew thick with rot and something else. Gasoline. As he neared the mill, he saw it. A plume of smoke curling from the rear warehouse, faint orange light flickering inside. They were burning evidence, just like Brady said. But Walter wasn't here to stop the fire. He was here to see what they hadn't burned yet. The main doors had been padlocked with a fresh chain, but the side entrance was cracked open, just wide enough for a man to slip through if he wasn't afraid of getting cut on rusted metal. He eased inside, heart pounding. The interior was vast, hollow, and full of shadows. Once, it had smelled of hot sugar and diesel. Now it reeked of mildew, soot, and ammonia. Footsteps echoed somewhere ahead, heavy, unhurried. Then voices. Male, maybe 3. Walter moved along the edge of a conveyor line, ducking under twisted belts and rusted chutes. He peeked around a shattered vat. 2 men stood near a stack of pallets beside a burning barrel. One of them was Axel. The other was Jace Monroe, tall, pale, scar slicing from his left ear down to his jaw. He held a metal canister and was pouring fuel across cardboard boxes. Boss said no trace, Jace muttered. Photos, IDs, records, burn it all. What about the holding room? Axel asked, lighting a cigarette from the barrel's flame. We moving them or finishing it here? Jace shrugged. He ain't decided yet, but I'll say this. If we wait another night, that nosy bastard Dempsey's gonna crawl all the way inside our lungs. Walter's blood froze. You think it's him snooping around? Axel asked. Jace nodded. Brady talked, guaranteed. I went by his shack after you did your delivery run. He wasn't home, just blood and silence. Axel spat. Should have tied that loose end years ago. Walter shifted his weight, trying to ease back, then stepped on a shard of glass. It crunched. The noise was barely louder than a breath, but Jace turned instantly. Did you hear that? Walter ducked behind the vat as Jace drew his weapon and started walking. Axel followed, hand on his belt. Probably a raccoon. Or a drunk, Jace said, raising his voice. Come out, sweetheart. We got enough fire to keep you warm. Walter backed slowly, carefully. Then something cold and hard pressed against his temple. A third man. Found him, the man said softly. Axel and Jace appeared from the shadows, smiles blooming like bruises. Well, well, Axel said. Walter Dempsey, the swamp just can't keep you down, huh? Walter raised his hands slowly. You were never going to let them go, were you? Let who go? Jace asked, feigning confusion. The ghosts? The ones in your head? I saw the letter, Walter said. I know about the deals, the threats. You killed my son. Axel snorted. We didn't kill anyone. Not really. We just cleaned up when things went wrong. Jace leaned in. And if you're lucky, old man, maybe we'll let you join your kids in the same piece. Walter stared at him.
then headbutted the man holding him. The impact stunned both of them, but Walter was faster. He dropped, grabbed the revolver from his pocket, and fired once. The man behind him screamed. Jace raised his gun, but Walter rolled sideways behind a steel drum and fired again. Missed. Axel dove for cover, yelling, "Take him down!" Gunfire ripped through the mill. Sparks rained from metal beams. Bullets punched holes through rusted siding. Walter crawled between conveyor lines, breath ragged, mind racing. He had to survive, not for revenge, for Elsie, for Talia, because if they were still alive, they needed to know someone was coming, someone who wouldn't stop. Not this time. Walter's legs burned as he crawled through the rusted underbelly of the mill, each shallow breath drawing in smoke and rust. Gunfire echoed behind him, but further away now, Jace and Axel had split up, trying to flank him. It gave him a sliver of time. He reached the far corner of the factory floor, where a warped metal stairwell led down to the old storage level. He took it 2 steps at a time, gripping the rail with slick, shaking fingers. It was darker here, colder too. Concrete walls lined with forgotten machinery, shelves stacked with tools decades old, and a faint thrum in the air, like the heartbeat of something buried. Then he heard it. A voice. No, 2 voices. Muffled. Human. He moved toward it, stepping carefully around a collapsed beam. At the far end of the corridor was a door. Old, wooden, reinforced with metal bands. A single lock held it shut. The voices were behind it, clearer now. A woman's voice. "Shh, someone's coming." Walter's own voice cracked as he whispered, "Elsie?" Silence. Then, "Dad?" The word hit him like a freight train. His legs almost gave out. For a moment, all he could do was stare at the door and blink back the wetness in his eyes. "I'm here," he said hoarsely. "I'm gonna get you out." He raised the revolver and fired once at the lock. The shot echoed like thunder. The wood cracked but held. Second shot splintered the bolt. The door swung inward. Inside were 2 women. His daughters. Elsie, older now, her hair shorn and face hollow, but her eyes unmistakably hers. Chloe beside her, bruised and pale, clutching a rusted metal pipe like she was ready to fight to the death. Both of them froze when they saw him. Then Elsie rushed forward. Walter caught her in his arms, shaking with relief and disbelief. Chloe joined a moment later, sobbing into his shoulder. "I thought you were dead," Elsie whispered. "I was," Walter said. "Then I found a reason not to be." He pulled back, hands framing their faces. "Are you hurt?" "Not bad," Chloe said. "They kept us alive, used us when they needed leverage, but we're still here." Walter's heart pounded. He had them. They were real, alive, breathing, but they weren't safe. Not yet. "We have to move," he said. "Axel and Jace are still upstairs. I don't know how long." A voice cut through the basement, loud, amplified, from a speaker system. "Walter!" Jace's voice echoed through the mill. "Found your truck. Cute little revolver. Not much use when you're cornered, is it?" Walter grabbed Elsie and Chloe's hands. "Back way. Storage exit. Come on." They ran. Down a side hall filled with old generator parts, past doors that hadn't opened since the Clinton administration. At the end, a rusted metal ladder that led to a trap door in the floor, barely visible beneath tangled chains. Walter climbed first, pushing the hatch open. Moonlight. Open swamp. "Go! Now!" The girls climbed after him, gasping as they emerged into the clearing behind the mill. The bayou stretched before them, reeds swaying like silent witnesses. Then a gunshot cracked the air, missing by inches. "Run!" Walter shouted. They sprinted for the tree line. More shots rang out, bullets tearing through brush. Something grazed Walter's shoulder, hot pain streaking down to his elbow, but he kept moving. Behind them, Jace screamed, "You think this is over, Dempsey?" Walter didn't answer. He reached the tree line, ducked behind a fallen log with the girls. Then came a new sound. Helicopter blades. Sirens. From the direction of town, a wall of lights and vehicles surged through the cane fields, police cruisers, tactical trucks, even 2 boats coming up the bayou from the far end. The mill was surrounded. Jace's curses turned to panic. Walter looked up, breathless, as floodlights painted the sky white. Elsie clung to his side, tears in her eyes. "You found us," she whispered. He kissed her forehead. "I told your mother I would." The next 20 minutes unfolded like a fever dream. Dozens of officers in tactical gear stormed the sugar mill from all sides, floodlights flooding every corner, shouted commands echoing off rusted beams, boots crashing against concrete. Walter, Elsie, and Chloe crouched low in the swamp just beyond the clearing, watching the chaos through a wall of reeds. It was over fast. Jace was dragged out first, bleeding from a wound in his leg, still snarling like a wild dog. "You don't know what you've done," he spat at one officer. "You're not ready for what comes next." Axel followed minutes later, cuffed, cursing, his cocky smile long gone. His shirt was torn, one eye swollen shut. Even in defeat, he didn't look afraid, just cold, calculating. Walter didn't take his eyes off them. "Are there more?" he asked one of the officers once the scene was secured. "Others still inside?" The officer, a tall, calm man with sergeant stripes, nodded. "We found 3 more women in a locked room upstairs."
"All alive. Shaken, but responsive. We're getting them to the hospital now." Chloe's breath hitched. "We weren't the only ones." "No," Walter said grimly. "And that's why we have to tell everything. Every name. Every place. This ends now."
The medics arrived soon after. They loaded the girls into separate ambulances. Walter insisted on riding with Elsie, his hand clasped around hers the entire time. She held on like she'd never let go again. At Rosedale General Hospital, they were greeted like survivors of a shipwreck. Doctors, nurses, journalists pacing outside. Even Superintendent Miles Harper from State Police was waiting at the ER doors, files tucked under his arm, a storm behind his eyes. Walter stepped out of the ambulance, blood still drying on his sleeve. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning.
"Mr. Dempsey," Harper greeted. "You okay?"
"No," Walter replied, "but my daughters are alive, so I'll get there." Harper gave a grim nod.
"We've been tracking Axel for years. Never had enough to stick. Now we do. Smuggling, kidnapping, conspiracy, assault, and we're pretty damn sure a few bodies buried in swamp mud, too." Walter's voice was gravel. "And Maher?" Harper's mouth twisted. "We found files at the mill, ledgers, names, bank transactions. Maher's name shows up more than once. Looks like he helped suppress evidence after your kids disappeared. Paid well for it, too." Walter's fists clenched. "I want to see him." "You will," Harper promised. "He's in custody. We picked him up this afternoon in Baton Rouge trying to cross state lines." Walter nodded. It was enough. For now. That night, the hospital was quiet. Walter sat between Elsie and Chloe's beds, a blanket over his knees, dozing with his chin to his chest. The girls were sleeping, deeply, finally. Monitors beeped softly beside them, and the scent of antiseptic filled the air. Then a knock came at the door. June stepped in. She looked tired, but whole. A faint bruise at her temple and scratches on her hands from pulling Brady to safety. He'd survived the bleeding and was now under protective custody, cooperating with everything. She carried a small box. Walter raised his head. "What's that?" June walked over, opened it on the nightstand. Inside was the photo, the one that started everything. Caleb, Elsie, Chloe, smiling on the boat, free. And tucked behind it was another, a photo no one had seen before. Walter reached for it, frowning. It was a security camera still frame, slightly blurry, but unmistakable. Caleb, inside a warehouse, talking to a man in a sheriff's uniform. Not Axel. Detective Maher. Walter's heart stilled. June said softly, "Brady found it months ago, but he was too scared to show anyone." Maher hadn't just buried the case. He'd met Caleb, knew him, looked him in the eye, and turned away. Walter placed the photo gently on the table, then looked back at his daughters. "I'm going to make sure Maher never sees daylight again," he whispered. June put a hand on his shoulder. "You already did what mattered, Walter. You brought them back." He nodded slowly. But deep down, he knew. Justice wasn't a one-night thing. It was a road. Long, brutal, unfinished. And he was just getting started. 3 weeks later, the swamp was still whispering. But this time, it whispered different. The sugar mill was sealed off. Crime scene tape tangled in the wind, guarded day and night while forensic teams pulled every bone, ledger, and secret from its rotted core. State prosecutors announced a sweeping racketeering case, 24 suspects, charges ranging from conspiracy to homicide. Detective Maher was the headline. His trial would be televised, his face plastered on every screen in Louisiana. The once respected officer who'd looked away for a paycheck, now facing life in federal prison. But none of it brought back Noah. Walter stood knee-deep in the marsh, the afternoon sun glinting off the water like scattered coins. He wore black slacks, boots caked with mud, and a weathered shirt buttoned to the collar. In his hand, he held a small urn. June and Brady stood behind him, silent. On either side, Elsie and Chloe held hands, their eyes rimmed red but steady. The family had decided together. Noah wouldn't be buried in a graveyard. Not when his last moments had been near this water. Not when the river had taken him piece by piece and hidden him away. Instead, they'd come here, to the place where the cliffs met the current. Walter unscrewed the urn's cap. "He was just a boy," he said, voice quiet but firm. "He made a mistake, but he never stopped protecting his sisters." Elsie squeezed Chloe's hand tighter. Walter looked at them both. "He died fighting for you, and I'm proud of him, no matter what the world says." He tipped the urn. Ash fell like soft gray rain, curling over the water, caught by the wind, swallowed by the bayou. When the last of it was gone, Walter knelt and dipped his fingers into the river. "Goodbye, son." That night, at home, they lit candles. Dozens of them, lining the porch, the windowsills, the photo wall. Walter had cleaned the house from top to bottom. He didn't drink anymore. Coffee was his new ritual. He'd even started sleeping in his bed again instead of the couch. The girls stayed in the spare rooms for now. Therapy sessions were scheduled. Police interviews came weekly. It wasn't over, but it had begun. The after. They sat together on the porch, the sound of frogs and wind rustling through the reeds. Elsie leaned against Walter's shoulder. Chloe curled at his side, knees tucked up like she was 10 again. "You still dreaming about it?" Walter asked softly. Chloe nodded. "Yeah, but it's less sharp now." Elsie whispered, "Some nights I still wake up and wait to hear someone unlock the door." Walter swallowed. "That's okay. You're allowed to. Just remember, if anyone ever comes through that door again, it'll be me." June joined them after sunset, carrying pie and fresh ice for their lemonade. She'd been staying close, part friend, part shield. The kids called her Aunt June, now. It fit. They ate in silence for a while. Then June looked out at the dark and said, "So what now?" Walter didn't answer right away.
Instead, he looked at the two girls beside him. His girls, grown now, scarred but strong, and he thought of Noah, his stubborn grin, his loyalty, his last act of defiance. "What now?" Walter said finally. "We live." He didn't mean just breathing. He meant really living. No secrets, no silence, no more letting the swamp take what it wanted without a fight. He raised his glass. "To Elsie and Chloe, to June, to the ones we lost, and the ones we still have." They clinked their drinks. The candles flickered. And for the first time in 12 years, the Dempsey family sat in peace. Not perfect, not healed, but together. That was enough. For now.